Welcome to Backstage Pass with Gail Davis, your invitation into the world of keynote speaking and event planning expertise. Join us as we pull back the curtain and dive into exclusive interviews with speaking industry experts. From seasoned speakers to master event planners, we're here to provide you with the ultimate backstage experience. Get ready to unlock valuable insights, tips, and strategies that will elevate your events and leave your audience inspired. Hello, my name is Gail Davis, and I am your host, and I am so excited to have our guest today, Kyle Scheele. Kyle helps teams generate better ideas and execute them faster. He is known for bold, viral experiences, and while he's telling these great, outrageous, fun stories, he's also giving some take-home value to teams about practical, repeatable tools that they can use for creativity in action. He has some hilarious stories and very unconventional approaches, which includes launching the world's first fake marathon. And I love his story about gaining 1 million TikTok followers in just 25 hours. So we'll get into all of that. But first, I just want to say, welcome, Kyle. I'm so glad you're here.
Excited to be here.
Well, today, people see you as this creativity and innovation expert, but your journey to become a keynote speaker is unique, to say the least. Can you take us back to the beginning and share how a guy who's known for launching these wild experiments ended up being hired to be a speaker on stages all around the United States and outside the country as well?
Yeah, so actually those two journeys sort of started out separate and then merged into one. And so I spent about 12 years being a motivational speaker in the youth speaking market. So I did a million different high schools and colleges and student leadership conferences. And in that world, I was not talking about creativity at all. That's what I wanted to talk about, but schools won't really teach you to pay you to teach their kids to be creative. And so I was talking about things like kindness and empathy and making a difference. But the whole time I was also an artist and a creator of my own projects. And so I was doing all of these things for fun on the side. And then my sort of career was being a professional speaker in the youth world. And both of those things were going really well, but they were going in totally different directions. And so like I was getting, on some huge stages and making a lot of great progress in the youth world. And then I would have some project go viral over here and get a bunch of attention. And so whenever I met somebody and they said, "Oh, Kyle, I know who you are," I always kind of had to go, well, which version of me do you know? Because there's two different stories out there. And if I started talking about the youth thing and they went, "Oh, I thought you were the guy that made a cardboard Viking ship," I was like, "Oh, no, I am that guy," or vice versa. But eventually I kind of got to a point where I had done all of the big stages in that world. And I did, the biggest one was the National FFA Convention, which has about 67,000 people at this one event. And I did that event and it felt like I had beat the video game of that job. And I am a person, I've learned this about myself over the years, that if I don't have a challenge in front of me, I kind of just get bored. And so I was like, I know that there's no big mountain to climb here anymore. And if you do youth speaking for long enough, eventually you kind of start going, maybe I could try the corporate thing. And so I thought it would take like 3 to 5 years to kind of make that transition, to build up enough traction in the corporate world where I could leave the youth speaking stuff behind. But it was, as you know, it was just overnight. Like I think maybe it was 3 to 6 months. And then I had to stop taking youth stuff because I was too busy and it didn't make any sense anymore. And the cool thing about it was with corporate, I was able to kind of bring both of those worlds together. So I was able to bring all the experience on stage that I had in the youth world and then to talk about the thing that I'd always really wanted to talk about, which is how do you bring great ideas into the world?
I love that. And to be fair, you put in the reps in the youth market. It wasn't really an overnight success. I mean, you were a great speaker and then you just changed stages in a way, if you will. I love that.
Yeah.
When did you realize personally that creativity wasn't something that was just going to help you, Kyle Scheele, stand out, but it was something that you could actually teach and it could be repeated inside organizations?
I think I've always, like as an artist and creator, I've always had this kind of backstage behind the scenes look at the process. And it's sort of like if you were a magician and you knew how the tricks were done, but the audience not only didn't know how they were done, but the audience actually thought they were magic. And they thought like, oh,
Mhm.
you just really like
Yes.
abracadabra this rabbit out of the hat. And you're going, no, 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 there's a secret panel in the hat and the rabbit's underneath the panel. And, and so that's sort of how I've always seen the creative process is I would hear people talking about artists and creators and things, and they would kind of, I can't believe, like, how did you ever come up with that? Or how did they ever do that? And as the person behind the scenes, I was like, oh, I can tell you how they did it. Like, and not only, it doesn't like take away the magic, it just sort of goes, hey, you actually have the magic too. You can do this thing. And I also got sick of just so much like sort of gatekeepiness in the art and creativity world where they act like this is a thing that only some people can do and you're kind of on the outside and we're on the inside. And I think that that just ends up leaving a lot of really great ideas on the table. And so yeah, I think it was kind of all of those things coming together. And also just selfishly, like I teach this stuff because I am a junkie for good ideas. I like making my own ideas, but I also love seeing somebody else bring something really cool into the world. And so I kind of joke that I want to be like the Johnny Appleseed of creativity, where I'm just out there planting seeds, and other people are taking that and they're turning those into their own amazing creations that I then get to enjoy. So yeah, that's kind of how all that happened.
One of the myths that you challenge is, people think, oh, some people are creative and some people aren't. And I think you think everybody's got that spark of creativity. How do you help people see that? And what is it that organizations usually get wrong about, well, some are creative and some aren't?
I think how I help people see it is just kind of breaking down creativity into what does that actually mean? And to create just means to make something new. And we've all made something new before. And you and I are making a podcast right now that didn't exist before. And we've
Sure.
all gone into our pantry and been like, oh man, I haven't grocery shopped. How do I make dinner out of these 5 random things that I have? That's a creative act. Anytime you make something new. But what people do is they kind of say, well, yeah, but that doesn't count. That doesn't count as creativity. And so then I'll kind of always drill deeper, like, well, what does count for you? And it's always like it's painting or design or sculpture or whatever. And then I can point out, well, you've painted before. You took an art class when you were in high school. And eventually you kind of get people to admit, I don't actually have a line that I can really defend. It's just sort of, I feel like I'm on the outside. And I think that's the problem. And when you ask, where do corporations get this wrong? I think society gets this wrong because most of us at some point in our life got this message that you're not creative or you didn't make the cut. And sometimes that's an explicit statement. Sometimes an art teacher told you, oh man, you can't draw worth anything. Or sometimes it's like a parent going, oh, your sister's the creative one. And sometimes it's just sort of an implicit, subtle message that you get over time. And so by the time you get into the corporate world, you've kind of already sorted yourself into one camp or the other. And I think where corporations get this wrong is that they don't push back against that and they don't challenge that. They just accept like that, hey, the most vocal people must be the most creative ones. They're the ones giving us all the ideas. And the reality is that the other people have ideas. They just don't feel like those ideas have been given a chance. They don't know what to do with them. And so oftentimes you end up sitting on this like really untapped resource of creative potential. And one of the ways this plays out that I've seen so many times is that a company will have some big problem that they're facing and they're beating their heads against the wall, they're scratching their heads, they can't figure out this problem. But instead of going to their entire team and saying, hey, here's the problem, here's how we'll know when we've solved it, here's kind of like this is the thing we can't figure out, they end up hiring an outside consulting firm. And the funny thing is, what those outside consulting firms do is they come in and they interview your entire team. And then they find the answer that the receptionist had, or the janitor, or this like mid-level manager who had never been asked. And then they come back to the leadership and they go, hey, we found the solution. It's only $50,000. And you could have had it for free if you would have just asked your people. And so I think that that's what I want to help companies do is figure out, hey, how do we tap into the unique perspective and experience and wisdom and knowledge of all of the people on our team? Because you hired those people for a reason. Like by default, the people that are on your team are the best people that you could find for that job. And so like you probably picked them for a reason and they probably have insights and you just got to figure out how do I get those insights out? And then how do I combine those with other insights from other people in the company, because it's very likely that each person has a unique insight and perspective on the problem and the customer and the issue. And if you put all those things together, you kind of get the full picture. And oftentimes the solution just kind of emerges organically from that.
I had a business coach that once sat in on a meeting and then talked to me afterwards about the difference between leading a meeting and facilitating a meeting. And she said, you know, honestly, she said, you're doing a lot of talking. And some people in the meeting are talking and some people aren't saying anything. What are those people thinking? And it really caused me to pause, and try to pay a lot more attention when you're not hearing from somebody that's been working for you for 3, 4, 5 years. And just that simple act of not putting them on the spot, but just trying to engage them and elicit what their ideas are. I think that must tie into what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that, we talk so much about leadership, but how many speakers have you ever heard who are doing their entire thing about facilitating conversations, or that facilitatorship is not a term that we use, but there's a million books on leadership. I've got a bunch of them on the shelves behind. And I think that that's one thing that I always try to push back against with leaders, is I say, as a leader, it's not your job to solve every problem. Like, a lot of leaders think that they kind of feel the burden of leadership that we talk about, and they feel like, well, I've got to be the one to solve this problem. And I always say, no, just, this is a tiny clarification. Your job is actually to make sure the problem gets solved. It doesn't matter who solves it. And you don't get bonus points. It's great if you can solve it. I think for your ego, it feels wonderful and all of that. But if it takes you 2 years longer to figure it out yourself, to figure out something that your assistant knew the entire time, or that the first, new hire walked in off the street and could have gone, oh yeah, I could have told you that. That's not good leadership. That's ego getting in the way of progress. And so I think that when you can facilitate discussion, and when you can say, hey, every idea here has an opportunity and has a chance, and we're going to set standards for that, and we're going to put organization around that. This isn't like wild, unbridled creativity for no goal. We're trying to specifically solve this problem. I think that you end up solving problems faster and easier. And you also build a culture where people feel like, hey, I was a part of that. This thing that I said, this thing that I noticed, ended up turning into a product or a solution or whatever. And that's the kind of place that people don't want to leave.
I love that. So it's a lot about culture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When organizations bring you in to speak, is there a particular problem that they're trying to solve?
Sometimes, but sometimes not. Sometimes it's kind of all over the place. Some of them are saying we need more ideas for our team in general, and some of them are saying we have this one specific problem that we're trying to solve. And I think that that's great, because I think that creativity is just problem solving. I think it's a fancy word for problem solving. And in my next book, I talk about this concept that an idea is just an identified possibility. An idea is just a way of saying, well, we could try this. And when you get a culture where ideas are generating, it's really just saying, what are all the things that we could try? And sometimes that's, hey, we could try this thing that nobody asked for, but hey, I had this totally wild idea for a product. And sometimes it's, hey, here's a thing we could try to solve this specific problem. And so I help companies try to figure out how to identify those possibilities. How do we give them a chance, whether that's towards a specific thing or just, hey, generally we need more creative ideas.
You just mentioned your next book. Can you talk a little bit about the books you've written? Because I know I bought 2 of them for my grandchildren. So tell the listeners about your books you have already written, and then go ahead and give us a little preview on what you're working on.
Yeah, so I have written 3 books. 2 of them are children's books, and one of them is an adult nonfiction book. The children's books, one of them is right behind me right now. It's called The Pizza with Everything on It, and that is a kid's story. It's a ridiculous story about a kid who wants to make a pizza with everything on it, but he's very literal about that. So he keeps putting more and more stuff onto the pizza until it collapses. It forms a pizza black hole and ends up destroying the universe. And then there's a pizza Big Bang, and the universe is remade out of pizza. And that's a story I actually tell on stage about why you have to give ideas a chance and why you have to protect ideas early on, because that was a story my entire high school and college. I really wanted to be a children's picture book writer, and I wanted to write stories for kids. And then I started looking into how hard it is. And I just became so discouraged, because everyone said it's basically impossible. You're not going to get a deal. You're not famous enough. You don't know, you don't have a connection. You don't go to this school, whatever. And then, so I gave up on that. I dreamed for almost a decade. And then when I finally came back to it, all the stuff that people said would be hard wasn't hard for me. It is hard sometimes, and I just happened to get really lucky, and it wasn't. And so that book has really like taken off, and it was in the Amazon Christmas catalog one
Yep.
year, and they put the follow-up book on a billboard in New York City, and I've gotten messages from parents, and it was called one of the best children's books of the year. So that book is A Pizza with Everything on It. The follow-up is called A Sunday with Everything on It. And then I wrote a book called How to Host a Viking Funeral, which was about this big creative art project I did where I invited people from around the world to send me their regrets or their mistakes or things that they wanted to leave behind in the past. And then I collected 21,000 of those from people around the world and built a 16-foot tall, 30-foot long, giant ornate Viking ship, put all of the regrets into it and set it on fire. And so that book is kind of about what I learned from that process. Um,
Did the
my new book.
Viking did the oh yeah, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Come
Yeah.
back. I was gonna say, did the Viking funeral happen before you got the 1 million TikTok followers, or what order did that happen?
Yeah, yeah, it
Okay.
happened way before that. So actually, so I just turned 40 about a month ago, and the whole impetus for the Viking funeral thing was when I turned 30. So 10 years ago, I was about to turn 30, and my mom was just asking me, "Hey, are you going to do anything special for your birthday?" And I just made a joke about, I said, "Oh, I'm not going to celebrate, I need to mourn the death of my 20s. And so I'm going to have a funeral for my 20s." And she was like, "Well, that's kind of morbid." And she was like, "Are you going to have like a coffin and people put their gifts in the coffin?" And I was like, "No, I'm not going to do a regular funeral. I'm going to do a Viking funeral." So I built a smaller ship. The first ship I built was about 6 feet or 16 feet long and 8 feet tall. It's roughly the size of like a minivan. And I put these big letters and numbers in it that said my 20s, and then I shot Roman candles at it and set it on fire with my friends. And that kind of was like an early viral moment. I think that video did maybe like 75,000 views across platforms, but that was like huge for me at the time. And I got all of these letters from people for like a year afterwards. Most of my projects would kind of blow up for like a week, and so I would get a couple emails or comments or whatever, and then the world would move on. But this one, like a year later, people were like, "Hey, I just found this video and you inspired me to think about the stuff that I want to let go of, the stuff I want to leave behind in the past." And they would always kind of say the same thing. They're like, "I wish I could let go of my stuff with the Viking funeral." So after like a year of getting these emails, I was like, "All right, let's do one more Viking funeral." So I said, "I'll build a big ship. Everybody send me anything you want to let go of, and I'll set it on fire." So that all actually happened. I had already burned the Viking ship. I burned it in December of 2019. And this was all before I had transitioned into corporate. And then the pandemic hit. That was kind of my goal, was to transition out of the youth world in 2020. And I had this whole plan. It was going to be awesome. And then the whole world shut down. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
never mind. And so then at the end of that year was when I went viral on TikTok. And I had already had a book deal, and the book was written, and the book came out the next year. So yeah, my publisher was very stoked when I was like, "Hey, I accidentally got 1 million followers on TikTok." But that at the time, TikTok Shop didn't exist, and so it didn't translate into like, oh, this giant book success.
Yeah.
But it was still great.
I cut you off. You were going to tell us about your new book. I'm sorry. I heard the word Viking and I had to go there. But what is the new book about?
So the new book is called How Ideas Work. That's the tentative title. We're finalizing all that right now, but it comes out in January. And that book is basically everything I know about the creative process. And I've been studying this for about 20 years. I've just been really fascinated by where do ideas come from. And that's the question that I get probably more than any other question. When I make something, people go, "Where did you come up with that idea?" And sometimes it was really obvious and sometimes it wasn't. And so I was like, I want to really like understand this process. And so I did a bunch of research and interviewed other really prolific creators. And I ended up identifying there's actually this really simple 4-step cycle that every idea has to go through. And once you identify that cycle, then you're able to say, "Oh, here's where I'm stuck. And here's what I need to be doing right now." Because each step of that cycle requires different things from you, and it requires different inputs, and it requires different kind of mindsets. And so when I discovered this cycle, I went back to all of these people I'd interviewed and all of my friends who are creators. And I said, "Hey, tell me if this is wrong, or if I'm like going too far here or anything." And it was pretty wild. Like every single person I showed the cycle to, they went, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen anybody explain it like this, but this is exactly how it works." I had a Disney Imagineer who is a longtime friend of mine, and I was like, "Dave, you've been professionally creative for decades. Like, I think that this might be how the creative cycle works." And he said that. He goes, "I've never seen anyone describe it like this, but this is exactly how it works." And he's like, "This is going to help so many people." So I'm very excited for that book to come out. That comes out in January.
Okay.
And a new keynote's going to be coming out around that same time. So that's the new one, how ideas work.
So, there's lots of different kinds of meetings out there. When I think of the calendar, it seems like it starts with sales kickoff meetings, and then we move into sales recognition, and then there's always leadership meetings. And of course, I had you come speak to my EO Dallas Entrepreneur Organization group. So there's always membership meetings. But when you look at your calendar and all the keynotes you're doing, is there a sweet spot, a particular audience that really this feels like it really resonates with, or what's your response to that?
I remember when I first got started in the corporate speaking world and I went to a boot camp for speakers and they said, okay, when agents or bureaus ask you this specific question, which audience do you resonate? They said, do not say my message is for everyone because they've heard that before and it's not true. And they were like, you've got to really nail it down and say like my message is for left-handed single mothers between the ages of 27 and 31 and a half. And so I remember being like, okay, that's what I've got to do. And I've had so many conversations now with agents and bureaus that I've worked with where they would kind of pull me aside and go, hey, that is generally true, but for you, it's not true. Like your stuff really is for everyone. And I think it makes sense because I think creativity is for everyone. Like I said, creativity is just problem solving. Everyone has problems to solve. And I don't think we're getting past that anytime soon. And I think that's why, to answer your question, when I look at my client base, it's incredibly diverse. And so I've got white collar, blue collar, nonprofit, tech. I'll do like a farmers association and then some new app and then an association meeting and then, a Fortune 500 company. And so it's all over the place. And I've never found any of them that were like, no, we actually don't need any new ideas. We're pretty good. And so I think everybody needs new ideas.
So is that how simple it is? Any audience that could benefit and wants to encourage new ideas, you're a fit for?
I mean, I think so. I think, and really that is pretty much every audience. I think every
Right.
audience needs new ideas and they need the tools to be able to get those ideas into the workplace. I mean, there are a lot of creativity speakers who can talk about, I personally invented AI or something. And I go, that's cool, but you're obviously just way smarter than I am. I want to hand people tools that they can take to the workplace and go, oh, I know exactly how to start getting good ideas out of my team and bringing them to life in the world.
I know that when you came to meet with our team, you talked about how you really do customize for each audience. And I thought, okay, everyone says that, but how does that really work? And then you came to speak to EO Dallas, and I loved how you really wove in your own personal story of being an entrepreneur and having the ideas that work and having the ideas that don't work and the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, the success. So I don't know if that's an example of how you customize, but I really remember that night, I wanted you to come because I think you're funny. And then you came and I was like, I mean, you may remember me telling you this, but I was like, dang, Kyle, there's some good take home value here. You are funny. The stories are great, but actually there's really some good sticky take home value. So, you want to comment on how you customize? I'm curious.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I would say I do want to be funny. I think that humor is a way to sort of disarm people. It gets them to let their guard down. It gets them to open up and listen a little bit. But I think if somebody walks away from a full keynote of mine and their takeaway is, man, that guy was funny, then I missed the mark. What I want is for people to be walking away going, oh, I've got this notebook full of ideas, or here's the thing that I'm going to do. And so, I remember the first corporate keynote I ever did was at the Scottsdale Princess. And this lady came up afterwards and she had this notebook and she said, I just sent my boss an email about this idea that I've been keeping in this notebook. And we're setting up a meeting on Monday to talk about it. And I was like, that's it. That's how I know that
Awesome.
and so, yeah, to answer your question about customization, I mean, I always want to know as much as I can about the audience, like who is in this audience and why are they coming to this event? Why are you having them at this event? Are those separate things? Because sometimes those are totally different motives. The audience member wants one thing and the event planner wants something else. And so I always want to go, how do I hit a home run for this specific audience? And then I ask, all the questions about like how has their year been? Are they on a good year, bad year? How was last year? How are we feeling about next year? What are the trends? What headwinds and tailwinds do we have? What kind of terminology should I use? What kind of terminology should I avoid? I ask about stories and things like that. And so, because I remember I went to a conference one time and I was talking to the event planner, and they said they had this really big, very famous, like Fortune or best-selling author from the New York Times, somebody who I could mention their name right now and you'd be like, oh yeah, I know who that is. And they said that everyone was like, that was really cool, but I don't like, how does it apply to us? Like, it was an interesting story for an hour and they paid a lot of money for this. And so, I never want people going, yeah, this guy doesn't know anything about us. I want them to go, oh man, he did his homework and he knows exactly what we're facing. And then that's my job, is to not just hit a home run in general. That's relatively easy. I want to hit a home run for that specific audience.
If someone is listening right now and they're thinking, I want to be better at this. I want to have an environment where my teams feel that their creativity is really appreciated, and I want to have an environment where I encourage people to generate ideas. What's one small step that they could take today to get started on having an environment like that?
Well, they could pre-order my book, but aside from that, I would say in my keynote, which is called "Becoming an Idea Factory," I give like, here are the 5 things that every idea needs, and so I'll give you the first one today, and that one is that every idea needs a chance. Every idea needs an opportunity, because the thing is, your brain, the human brain, is actually not necessarily a truth-seeking machine. We like to think of it that way, like, oh, I look at 2 different arguments and I evaluate which one is more true, and then I believe that one. But that's not actually how our brains work. Our brains are belief justification machines. We kind of decide what we want to believe, and then we build a case around that. And Warren Buffett said, what the human being is best at doing is interpreting all new information so that their prior conclusions remain intact. So we've all seen this before. I
Mhm.
mean, Gail, you've probably seen this with people who go, I think I should be able to get Brene Brown for $5,000. And you're like, well, that's an insane thing. She's not going to do it. But they just kind of go like, no, 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 I think we can do it. We want you to send a hard offer to Brene Brown for $5,000. And you're like, it's not going to work, but they don't care. Like, they've
Yeah.
decided this is a true thing in their mind. And so that's powerful for a lot of reasons. That's dangerous for a lot of reasons. But the one that I always focus on is that there is a very common belief. It's so common. People say it sort of like it's no big deal. And they say, oh, I'm just not a creative person. And that's not true. As we've discussed, every human being is creative. If you ever made a sandwich, you're creative. If you opened a new Word document and started typing in it, that's creative. But when you say, I'm not a creative person, your brain just says, okay, that's the party line. I'll go build a defense around that. And so it starts for looking for all the ways that it can defend that. And it's not hard to do, because you can defend any belief. You just ignore all the stuff that would contradict that belief. And so your brain starts showing you all of the ways in which your ideas haven't been as good as other people. It starts comparing your blooper reel to other people's highlight reel. And it starts just kind of shutting down that creative part of your brain. And so the first thing that you've got to do is just shift that and say, no, not only am I a creative person, but my team is a creative person. My team is full of creative people, and I hired them for a reason. They have unique perspectives. They have unique ideas and inputs, and it's very likely that the problem that's keeping me up at night has already been solved inside of this team somewhere, and it's just my job to get that out. And when you can shift that belief and like really cultivate that belief, then you start putting into action the things that are going to help you get those ideas out and into the world.
It's funny that you mentioned Brene Brown in your example, because probably 10 years ago, she had or maybe even longer, she had a book called The Art of Imperfection. And she did like these weekly video trainings, and I was into it. And I remember she talked about how when you're young and you're in kindergarten and you color, a lion and you make him pink with purple polka dots, everybody's like, man, that is so cool. Look at that purple lion with pink polka dots. That's so awesome. But somewhere along the way, somebody looks over and goes, lions aren't purple. And some people can blow that off and keep being creative. And other people, they just shut down and they're like, oh my gosh, I've got to paint this brown. And so
Yeah.
I was thinking about that the whole time you were talking, that I think we all start off creative, but somewhere along the way, for whatever reason, that can sometimes really get shut down.
I think that what I always say is, those gifts didn't go away. They just got covered up. there's still a part of you under there that's like, yeah, I really wanted to color it pink and purple. And that's still there. And so it's not saying, hey, we've got to, wipe out this team and bring in a more creative team. It's how do we uncover the creative gifts that are already inside the team that you have? How do we cultivate those things? Because, I talk about these 5 things that an idea needs. And the way that I set that up is I say plants have needs too, right? If you want a plant to thrive, you need to give it the right amount of air and water and soil and light and nutrients. And you see that kind of this time of year and maybe a little bit earlier when people start planting their gardens, and you'll see people on like Facebook or different like user groups and stuff where they go, oh, this plant is dying and I've tried everything. And then everyone goes, did you read the tag? Do you see how it says full sun? And do you see how you planted it under a tree? Like that's why your plant is dying. And I think the same thing is true of ideas where they need these certain things. And we just put them in an environment that's basically a desert. And we're like, why? Well, we put up a mission statement that says we value innovation. Why aren't we getting great ideas out of our people? And it's like, well, because you put that mission statement into a desert and then you shot down every idea that your people had. And so like, if we can shift that, if we can adjust the culture, then we can actually start getting great ideas out of people.
Well, I hope that all of the people that are listening and any event planner who has a team that needs more creativity, wants to encourage innovation, fresh thinking, that you'll think about bringing Kyle in. He's so much fun to work with. He does customize, and he just creates an energy that I think everybody can benefit from. So if that's something that you want to unleash in your organization, give us a call at GDA Speakers, and we will work with you about bringing Kyle to your next event. And Kyle, I'm looking forward to that book and seeing what you do in this world. And thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Gail. Always love working with GDA.
Thank you for joining us on Backstage Pass with Gail Davis. Tune in for more exclusive interviews and pro tips to elevate your events. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. We'll catch you next time behind the curtain on Backstage Pass.